I was finishing the last burial of the night when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, dragging footsteps. I turned around, and the grave I'd just filled was open again. But this time, it wasn't empty. Hello, little ravens. There's something different about cemeteries after dark. It's not just the silence. It's the weight of what surrounds you. The sense that every shadow could be something watching. Tonight, we'll explore 4 terrifying true stories from people they've seen what happens when the dead refuse to rest. From graveyard workers to late-night visitors, these encounters will make you think twice before stepping into a cemetery after midnight. So, turn off the lights and let's begin. I've been a gravedigger for almost 10 years now, working at a small cemetery in northern Pennsylvania. It's an old place, the kind with crooked headstones, iron gates that groan when you open them, and oak trees that look like they've been standing since the Civil War. Most nights, it's peaceful, quiet, the kind of quiet that almost makes you forget what's buried beneath your boots. I used to tell people I liked the solitude, and that's true. There is something strangely comforting about being the only one awake in a place full of the dead. But after what happened last October, I don't stay past sunset anymore. It was a Thursday. I remember that clearly because we'd had a burial that afternoon. A small service, maybe 6 or 7 family members. The man being buried was in his 70s, a retired teacher from town. The family seemed kind, but tense. You could always tell when there's bad blood. They left right before dusk, and I stayed behind to finish covering the grave and clean up the equipment. By the time I was done, the light was fading fast, and the air had that damp, metallic chill that always comes right before the fog sets in. I packed my tools into the wheelbarrow and started walking back toward the maintenance shed. That's when I heard it, a thud, not loud, but heavy, like someone stepping down hard on wet earth. I stopped, listening. The sound came again. Thud, closer this time. I figured maybe one of the night caretakers had come by early. I called out, "Hey, that you, Mark?" No answer. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, a deer maybe. But then came this faint noise, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. It sounded like a whisper, a voice carried by the fog. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the rows of headstones with my flashlight. The beam cut through the mist in thin white ribbons, but I didn't see anything. That's when I noticed the soil on the new grave, the one ID just finished, was sinking, just slightly, like something was pressing up from underneath. I froze. The dirt shifted again, and then I heard it. A slow, dragging scrape, like fingernails clawing against wood. I dropped the shovel I was holding. It hit the ground with a sharp metallic clang, echoing through the still air. My pulse spiked so fast I could hear it in my ears. I told myself it was just the soil settling. That happens sometimes. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Then, right in front of me, a small clump of dirt popped up from the center of the grave. Another one followed, and another, until the soil started to crumble, as if something below was trying to get out. I ran. Didn't even think. I just turned and bolted. My flashlight beam bounced across the headstones, lighting names and dates in flashes as I sprinted toward the truck. When I got inside, I locked the doors and turned the headlights on. And that's when I saw it. Through the fog, maybe 30 feet away, was a figure. It was crouched beside the fresh grave, pale, soaked, its movements stiff and wrong. For a second, I thought it was a person, maybe someone playing a sick prank. But then it stood up, and its head tilted toward me, slowly, unnaturally, until it looked directly into my headlights. Its eyes were open, wide and glassy. I swear to God, its skin was gray, stretched thin like wet paper. And when the lightning flashed, just for a heartbeat, I saw the outline of the coffin lid still attached to one of its hands. I slammed the truck in reverse and tore out of there. gravel spraying behind me. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. I must have sat there for 10 minutes, shaking, trying to convince myself that it was just exhaustion or some kind of hallucination. When I came back the next morning with the grounds manager, everything looked normal. The grave was untouched, soil flat, no sign of disturbance, no tracks. My flashlight, though, was gone. He told me I was probably seeing things, that fog and exhaustion play tricks on the mind. I wanted to believe him. But 2 days later, during another burial near that same plot, one of the workers hit something hard with the backhoe. When they cleared the area, they found another coffin buried beneath, one that wasn't in the cemetery's records. No headstone, no name, just an unmarked casket, old enough that the wood was almost black. The police came, but there wasn't much they could do. They took the coffin away for examination, and that was the last I ever heard about it. The official word was that it was a misplacement from a prior century, but I know what I saw that night. And sometimes when I'm walking the rows after dark, I still hear it. Faint, barely there, a single scrape from beneath the earth. Almost like someone still trying to dig their way out. I'm still there. I know it sounds crazy, but I need to be, and I hope you never go through this. It's very complicated. You end up wondering what really exists after death. Well, that's it, Hugs. The dead don't always rest easy, little ravens. Cemeteries are built for silence, but silence doesn't mean peace. I've heard other stories like this. Gravediggers, caretakers, even priests, all claiming they've seen movement beneath freshly packed soil. Maybe it's the mind playing tricks, or maybe it's something older, deeper, something that doesn't care for coffins or crosses. If you ever find yourself walking past a grave at night and you hear a scrape under the dirt, don't stop to listen. Just keep walking, because some doors, even in the ground, were never meant to open again. I used to work night security at a place called Hollow Field Cemetery, a small burial ground just outside of town. It wasn't one of those grand, historical cemeteries with marble angels and tall iron gates. No, Hollow Field was old, quiet, and forgotten. Rows of cracked headstones leaning at strange angles, patches of fog that never really cleared, and a cold that didn't seem to belong to the weather. The job sounded simple enough when I took it. Patrol the grounds twice a night, make sure no one was vandalizing graves, and check that the small maintenance sheds stayed locked. That was it. I didn't believe in ghosts or spirits. Not then. My first few weeks were uneventful. Boring, even. I'd walk the gravel paths, flashlight in hand, sometimes listening to podcasts or the radio through my earbuds. It was peaceful. But then, around the 3rd month, little things started happening. The first time, it was footsteps. Not mine. These were heavier, slower, deliberate. I remember standing near the fence line, hearing the crunch of gravel behind me, turning around and finding nothing there. The sound stopped the moment I moved. Then it started again, closer this time. I told myself it was an animal, or maybe an echo bouncing off the trees. You can convince yourself of anything when you're alone at night. But then came the second night. Same sound, same place. Only this time, I saw something. At first, I thought it was a statue. A tall shape standing between 2 headstones about 30 feet away. It didn't move. But when I pointed my flashlight at it, it wasn't a statue. It was a man. Or at least, it looked like one. He was standing perfectly still, dressed in a dark overcoat that looked soaked through, his face pale, almost gray under the light. I shouted out to him, told him the grounds were closed. No answer. I stepped closer, shining my light again, and that's when he turned his head toward me. The movement was slow, unnatural. His eyes, I swear to God, they caught the light like animal eyes. And then, before I could say another word, he smiled. Just a faint, crooked grin. I blinked, and he was gone. No sound of running, no movement between the graves. Just gone. I searched every inch of that cemetery for an hour, even called the sheriff's office to report a possible trespasser. I sent a deputy out. He found nothing. He told me maybe I was tired. Maybe it was a trick of the fog. I didn't argue. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. Over the next week, I started to dread going back. Every sound, the wind, the rustling leaves, the creak of the gate, made me jump. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I was sitting in the guard shack reviewing footage from the old cameras when I noticed something strange. In the corner of one frame, near plot 37, the same area where I'd seen that man, there was movement. I paused the footage and rewound. There he was again, standing still, just watching. The timestamp said 1:59 a.m. I looked at my clock. It was 2:03. That meant whatever it was still out there. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside, my breath turning white in the air. The fog was thicker than usual, curling around the gravestones like smoke. I reached plot 37 and saw footprints, bare footprints, in the frost-covered grass. They led straight toward one of the oldest graves in the yard, a sunken stone covered in moss. I leaned down, trying to read the name. It was almost gone, weathered by time. But I made out one word, Watcher. I froze. When I stood back up, the fog parted, and he was standing right there, no more than 6 feet from me. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. His mouth moved like he was whispering something, but no sound came out. I stumbled backward, dropped my flashlight, and ran straight for the shack. When I looked back, he wasn't following me. He was just standing there, watching. The sheriff's deputy came out again after I called, but like before, nothing. No footprints, no figure, nothing on the cameras. I quit the next morning. That was 2 years ago, and even now, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, certain that I see someone standing in the shadows outside my window, still watching. I believe this feeling is worse than seeing a spirit or ghost, however you want to call it. You're constantly on alert, and it's often difficult to fall asleep. I hope you enjoyed it. Cemeteries at night are not a good place to be. Remember that. Bye. You ever get that feeling that someone's watching you? And the more you try to ignore it, the stronger it gets? The man from Hollow Field wasn't seeing things. Sometimes the dead don't haunt places, they haunt people. There are stories like his everywhere. Cemeteries where one grave never grows cold, where a name no longer means the person resting beneath it. And maybe the Watcher wasn't guarding the dead. Maybe. He was guarding what's left of us, the living, to make sure we never forget what waits beyond the gate. If you ever find yourself walking through a graveyard at night, and the air suddenly feels heavier, don't look around. Just keep walking. Because if you look long enough, you might see him too. I worked at the St. Brindle Cemetery for 8 years. Night shifts, mostly. Long, quiet hours spent fixing fences, clearing leaves, or just sitting in the caretaker's shed listening to the wind. People think graveyards are terrifying at night, but that's not true. They're peaceful, silent, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts. Until something breaks the silence. The only person I ever saw there at night, besides myself, was the old gravedigger, Walter. Everyone in town knew him. Stooped back, wiry hair, always carrying the same oil lantern. He was the kind of man who looked like he'd been part of the cemetery forever. We didn't talk much. When we crossed paths, he'd just nod, say, "Evening." But a few months before he died, he started talking more little things. Stories about graves that didn't stay quiet, about the ones who knock from the inside. I laughed it off, thinking it was the rambling of a lonely old man. One night, the fog was so thick it looked like the ground was breathing. I was locking up the tool shed when I saw Walter's lantern flickering near the northern plot. Strange thing was, Walter had been buried there 2 weeks earlier. At first, I thought maybe someone was stealing his lantern from his grave. So I grabbed a flashlight and headed over. The fog swallowed everything. My beam barely reached 5 feet ahead. Still, I could see the light bobbing slowly through the graves, not like someone walking, but like it was floating. "Walter?" I called out, my voice half joking, half terrified. No answer. Just the sound of dirt shifting like something being dug. When I got closer, I realized the lantern was sitting right on top of his grave, flame steady, glass clean. And next to it, a fresh pile of earth. Someone had been digging again. The ground looked like it had been disturbed recently, just slightly sunken, like something heavy had moved underneath. And then I saw them, boot prints, leading out of the grave. My flashlight flickered. The smell of damp soil filled the air. Someone brushed past my shoulder. Cold and heavy, like being grazed by fog that could touch you. I turned the light around, and that's when I saw him. Walter, or what was left of him, standing between the headstones, lantern in hand. The glass glowed faintly red, and I realized it wasn't firelight. It was coming from inside, from his chest. He looked at me and said, "Can't let the light go out. Someone's got to keep the gates." Then the flame inside the lantern flickered once and went out. The moment it did, I heard dozens of sounds all around me, like fists pounding from beneath the soil. Every grave, every tomb, knocking. I ran. I don't remember how I made it back to the gate, but when I did, the air was completely still. The knocking had stopped. The lantern was gone. The next morning, I went back with the day crew. Walter's grave was perfectly sealed, the earth undisturbed. But when the foreman checked the maintenance shed, there it was, the lantern, next to my chair, just like he used to leave it while we were talking. I don't work there anymore, but sometimes, when the fog gets thick near my house, I swear I see a faint red glow through the trees. And if I pay attention, I can still hear the sound of shovels scraping the earth. I hope he's doing well wherever he is. A good person. He deserves a good rest. You have a good channel. That's why I decided to send my story. A hug to everyone, and to Walter too. They say every cemetery has a keeper. Not always the one you can see. Maybe Walter never left. Maybe the light he carried wasn't for the living at all, but for the ones who keep coming back, looking for the way out. If you ever pass a graveyard at night and spot a red light through the fog, don't stare too long, because sometimes the light stares back. If you pass by a cemetery at night and see a red light in the fog, say hello to Walter. Rest in peace, my friend. Let's move on to today's last story. I used to work maintenance at a small cemetery on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a few acres surrounded by rusted gates and leaning tombstones. It wasn't the kind of job you brag about, but it paid enough, and honestly, I liked the quiet. The caretaker before me, Old Man Harris, had worked there for nearly 50 years before he passed. The guy practically lived on the grounds in this little cabin by the trees. When I got hired, the owner told me I could use the same place, said it had everything I'd need. He wasn't kidding. Inside, it looked like time had stopped in 1973. There were old photographs of Harris on the mantel, a dusty lantern by the window, and a small cot that creaked every time I breathed. The first few weeks were fine, peaceful even. I'd trim the grass, patch the fence, check that no one vandalized graves. But after a while, things started feeling off. It began with the smell, a faint, sweet rot that drifted in through the window at night. I thought maybe an animal had died under the cabin, but I couldn't find anything. Then came the voices. It weren't whispers, not quite. More like fragments of words carried on the wind. Sometimes I'd hear my name, sometimes crying. But the worst part was the knocking. Always around 3 a.m., 3 slow knocks. Always coming from beneath the floorboards. I told myself it was pipes or my imagination. But one night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the lantern, went outside, and pried open the hatch under the cabin. The air that came out was ice cold. There was nothing but dirt and an old crawl space. Still, I shined my light around, my hands shaking so badly the flame flickered. That's when I saw it. Scratches. Hundreds of them, deep, desperate gouges in the wood beams, like someone had clawed their way toward the hatch. And written over and over again in shaky letters. "Let me out." I stumbled back, heart racing, and that's when I heard something move inside the cabin. Above me. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Dragging. I froze. No one else had a key. When I finally got the courage to climb out and go back inside, everything was silent again. But something had changed. The photographs on the mantel, all of them, had been turned face down. Every single one. I packed a bag that night and drove to my sister's place across town. The next morning, I called the owner and told him I was done. He didn't sound surprised. In fact, he sighed like he'd heard it before. "Don't worry about it," he said quietly. "No one lasts there long." I asked him what he meant. He hesitated, then said something that stuck with me ever since. Old Harris. He wasn't buried here. He refused. Said he'd already spent his whole life among the dead. We honored his wish and cremated him. But he paused. Every caretaker since swears they still hear him walking at night, still keeping watch. I never went back. But sometimes, when I drive past the cemetery on foggy nights, I see a dim orange light glowing from the cabin window, flickering, just like an old lantern. Some people fear the dead will rise, but maybe the dead never left. Perhaps old Harris wasn't haunting the grounds. He was protecting them, guarding the silence he kept for half a century. And maybe that's the real curse of the caretaker's cabin. Once you tend to the dead long enough, you start to belong to them. And that, little ravens, concludes tonight's descent into the graveyard silence. 4 stories, each one a reminder that cemeteries aren't places of rest, they're places of memory. Of voices that still whisper through the cracks of stone and the roots beneath your feet. From the forgotten mourner to the watchful caretaker, each of them still waiting for someone to listen. If tonight's stories chilled your blood, feed the shadows by leaving a like and subscribe to stay close. Now, the night doesn't end here. On the final screen, 2 new doors are waiting for you. Choose one, but choose carefully. Because once you look back into the dark starts looking back.